Welcome everybody to Job Search Like a Recruiter. This is our third part in a series. We put this together because everybody's, this is the worst job market we've seen in, I don't know, Jerry, what would you say, like 10, 15 years?
10, 15? No, I think we go a little further than that.
Okay. All right. I might be just going off of my experience.
Yeah, you might be going off of your experience. 10,
we'll
15.
get to that.
I got a little, I've seen a few of these.
Okay,
so, yeah.
All right. We'll get to that too. I actually graduated in the last recession. I was talking to Brett about that. Yeah.
I love it.
With a finance degree, I was working for Mellon Capital in San Francisco. They called us all in a room and they said, we're closing doors, going bankrupt. This is all of your last days. So that's when I graduated. But we can get into that. I want to first welcome our panelists. For those of you who don't know the Jerry Crispin, I am so very honored to have you on the show today, Jerry. And, Brett and I were talking about all the things that you've done and all the, just being a luminary in the industry and just, ahead of your time in just so many ways. And I don't want to embarrass you or anything, but you are the co-founder and the principal for Career Crossroads, and you have a new venture, new project, Recruiters Recruiting Recruiters. And
one of several people involved in that. Just playing. It's good.
Yeah. So many good things there. And also on the show, we have Brett Feig. And Brett was the VP of Talent Acquisition for IPG Media. His position also coveted, like so many other people and those here on the call today. I mean, this is really why you're here, so we can talk about strategies and discussions. So I almost feel like it's part reality show because we're following Brett as he goes through his job search and we're going to get him a job. And and he's sharing his journey and his tools and everything that everybody can use to also get ahead of the game in this job market. And so just instrumental stuff. And if you haven't seen the first two shows, they're on our YouTube channel, TechRecruit YouTube channel, and also on our website, techrecruit.io. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Jerry. Even though I want to actually ask you could you tell us a little bit more about Career Crossroads and also the Recruiters Recruiting Recruiters?
Okay, sure. Happy to. Listen, I'm thrilled to be here. I love the idea of people helping each other. I'm just an absolute fan of the fact that, one of the best ways to find a job is to help somebody else find a job. And it's almost sounds counterintuitive. And over many years, I've seen it as something that people are reluctant to do. But the more you can be helpful to people who are looking for the same thing you're looking for, the more likely you're going to find opportunities that are just, I think, in my opinion, extraordinary, and not just for now, but for a longer period of time. So I'm just a fan of that. I think there's a little bit of irony in that I probably am not looking for a job, not ever again, that kind of thing. And I've been around a long, long time, but I still maintain a passion about community. And so Career Crossroads, the short version is it's a community of talent acquisition leaders that I support. And I support them to talk and work with each other, to help each other, engage each other about practices. I will also say that I'm kind of opinionated about who gets to be part of a community. I think that they should have some critical thinking skills. I think they should be passionate about recruiting. They should care about it. They should be compelled to improve. And finally, they should be willing to share unconditionally. And I got to tell you, those four things, if somebody doesn't have those, then I encourage them to do other things besides hang out with me, because this is what I'm about. And so I've been doing this for a long, long time, and a couple things happened in March. One was that some of my members, and they're all large companies, by the way, called me up, and one of them said, it's not for public consumption yet, but in 3 days, I'm going to lay off 100,000 people. And, you have to be impacted by that, right? And I was getting those kinds of calls. And you could hear the pain in the voice of the head of TA or the head of HR about what was happening. They were using a term that we haven't seen in other recessions, furlough. And obviously there's no actual definition for furlough. But it kind of meant that I want you back. I'm going to let you go, but I do want you back if I'm furloughing you. And even though I'm not quite sure what that really means downstream. So some companies were paying their employees, some companies were paying benefits and so on and so forth. But all of the TA leaders who I talked to wanted to make sure that they were inventing or reimagining ways to continue communicating with people who were leaving, and they wanted to help them as well. And so some of us basically got together and said, maybe there's something that could happen here. Because what was happening was some of these companies were getting in touch with other companies directly, like CBS was contacting Hilton was contacting CBS, and this was happening over and over again, basically saying, hey, I've got to hire 50,000 people. You're getting rid of 100,000 people. I think I could train some of your people to do some of my work if they wanted to do that. And we could probably cut out some of the middlemen along the way, including some of the middle practices that would delay things like background checks, et cetera, because you've already done that. Give me a break. And so some fascinating things were happening. I was going, well, what if technology tools would help this? And a lot of technology companies were willing to have a conversation, but they were all doing their own thing. So a lot of them were stepping up different kinds of ideas. So we said, we're not gonna get technology and talent acquisition to all come together, in one kumbaya. It's not gonna happen. But maybe we could convince folks to try to take care of our own. And that's when someone said, you mean like recruiters recruiting recruiters? And we said, boy, I can't get that out of my head already. Recruiters recruiting recruiters.com. All right, we can get that, right? So we bought that, and Smart Recruiters and Great People and iSIMS and a bunch of other people basically contributed ideas. Smart Recruiters contributed a significant amount of things that was very helpful to basically setting up a platform. And the platform essentially is to scrape the companies that are approved, and I'll get to that in a minute, but companies that are approved of their jobs, filter out any that are recruiting roles, and then make that available to any of the recruiters who might be looking for a job. So it's a good idea. Can we do it? And we figured out how to do it. But our members also said, you know what? I don't want to recommend to somebody I'm furloughing to go to a place that they're not going to be treated properly. So we wanted to define what that is. So we created a code of conduct and it's basically a minimal bar. And the minimal bar is set expectations, deliver on the expectations you set, and no black holes. Unacceptable. And we basically said that if you want to be a company that has a job and want to go tap into the recruiters who are on the platform, or have your job posted so that they can tap you, you got to agree to the code of conduct. And if you, and we'll know whether you live up to it, because we're going to ask the recruiters, who did you touch, who touched you, and did those three things happen? And I will tell you that in the last few weeks, there were a couple instances in which that did not happen. And those employers are no longer a part of recruiters recruiting recruiters. And so they get a call from me, and I basically get to kick them off. So it's kind of fun. And we're now at about 300 employers. We have about 200 jobs that are there. That's not a lot. We're trying to provide more resources, like where else could you go? But recruiters aren't dumb. They know a lot of places that they can go and search and find a whole bunch of jobs. It may not be that they're good jobs, but some of those that are good, they can apply to, but they're not necessarily going to hear from the company. Isn't it ironic that recruiters might be the first ones not ghosted by the employer? But because we get accused of ghosting our candidates, so it's kind of interesting to see that happen from that perspective. But at recruiters recruiting recruiters, no, we're not doing that. You gotta be able to at least say, hey, no, we're not going further.
And you bring up an interesting point that this is probably one of the worst markets we've seen in, you said, more than 25 years. So for anyone in the market right now who's struggling or having a challenging time trying to kind of get their feet in the door, what have you seen? What have you heard? What's been sort of the echoes in the hall from the recruiters that you've chatted to?
Well, I've been around for a long, long time, and obviously there's a couple issues. One is you need to know where the likelihood is that there either is a job or that there might be in a reasonable period of time. And obviously there's things that you can infer about those industries that are, not going to be coming back anytime soon. And if they're not, and they're not going to be doing much hiring, there's not going to be many jobs there for recruiters for sure. That, and so that's one key issue is what are the possibilities for how you would infer, what's working, what isn't working. And so as a sourcer, as somebody who's looking at competitive intelligence, as somebody who studies those kinds of things, most recruiters should have some skill set in terms of being able to start making some lists. So I would be making lists of those that have high probability of either having a job now or having a job at some point. I would use, obviously, the job boards and those kinds of things to help confirm that to some degree. How often have those jobs shown up? That kind of thing is always a helpful piece to this. But that's only a first step. And I do think I would be proactive about it as opposed to waiting for something to tell me, like an alert that says, oh, by the way, have you thought about this job? Well, that alert got sent out to you and 10,000 other people. So I want to be proactive about the kinds of places that I want to set up and maybe study, maybe get some kind of algorithm going that feeds me those alerts that I've created. So that's a piece of what I would be doing. But I would also be looking at lists like the 100 best companies in America to work for. How many are in my commute range? How many, what are the best companies that I've never been in that I would love to be able to work for a company whose leadership is like this, whose willingness to treat people is like this, whose commitment to, values that I have is like this. And, you take into account those kinds of things, and now you have a list of companies. And now I have a very strong opinion, and it's encapsulated in really one sentence, and that is, don't ever apply ever to a company that you don't have an internal referral. Period. And I believe that when you do spend lots of time applying to a lot of companies out there, you end up wasting the vast majority of that time. Eventually, it'll click. But to my way of thinking, you'd be better off spending your time ensuring that inside of each of the companies you would want to work in, there is an individual who's willing to be your employee referral. And I believe that I can connect and have an employee refer me inside of 5 to 10 minutes, period. And the way I would do it is the way I would do it if I were a recruiter, which I'm not, but been there, done that. And there are way better sources than me. So if I can do this, you can bet your tail that most sources should be able to do this relatively quickly. And here's the way I would be looking at this. I'd be looking at it from the point of view of affinity, not just that I know the person, not that I'm a one connection away on LinkedIn, because that had to be a choice, either of them or of me. I want to find all the people that I went to school with who are now working in the companies that I want to work in. All the people who I've worked in several different companies. So, did any of those people who are in the company I want to get into, did they ever work in a company that I worked in? How about a professional association? How about some community organization? And if you have not gone to school, if you've not been part of a professional association, if you've never worked in another company, it's about time you start getting involved, get organized, join something, volunteer. It's going to get you a whole bunch of people that you can try to figure this out with now, and I believe that if you did this, you would find that you went to school maybe 5 years before someone who's now there, who's going to school, track them down. And I wouldn't be saying I want a job. I would be saying I'm targeting your company, and I'm targeting your company for these 4 reasons. And I'd like to confirm that those reasons are legitimate and valid, and you and I have this connection, and I think I'd like to listen to what you have to say about that. And then when I do that, because I think 9 out of 10 people would tell me, sure, I'll give you 5 minutes of time. Then after that, I say, hey, thanks, I really appreciate that. And if I find a job in your company that fits what I'm interested in, I would love for you to be my employee referral. Could you tell me just a little bit about how that works in your company? Do you get a bonus? Do you have to put my resume in? Do I put my resume in, do the application, and then put your name down in field number 55 or whatever the hell I have to do? But I would be learning this. I would be making notes about this. And I got to tell you, in a couple months, I'd have a job.
Wow.
And that's how intense I am about that kind of issue. I want to spend 8 hours a day doing that. And maybe 2 hours a day, and I'm being obnoxious here, but I use an 80-20 rule in that I want to be proactive and create stuff. And I'll still look for the luck shot, So 20% of the time, check a job board, get that alert, listen to somebody say I should just throw my resume that way, or track down the hiring manager and mail it to their home or something other that's creative, whatever. All those things are very creative. But I think you're in better shape if you get anyone inside that company to be your employee referral, because now revert back to being a recruiter. What do you see on that ATS screen? You see all those people who've applied for the job. Is there a little red check on the back of somebody who's actually met the conditions for a referral? There is.
On most systems,
forces the recruiter to at least look at it. And so I want to start this with a piece of data. And it is for years, up until probably the mid-teens, I collected data from lots of companies about how many referrals they made, how many people they hired, and what their percentages were and all that kind of stuff. And it comes down to this. In a job in which 100 people apply, only 4 of them were met the conditions of an official referral, employee referral, on average. And obviously, nothing's active. But still, just listen to this. So half everybody can discount half of that 100 almost immediately for good or bad reasons. I'm not going to go into that right now, but the fact is at least half get dispositioned as I'm not hiring them. That leaves 50, of which 2 instead of 4, 2 are qualified and referred, and 48 not. And I can assure you that most recruiters, whether they think about it or not, whether it's unconscious bias or not, will make sure those 2 that are qualified are part of the final slate of 5. And the
2 that are qualified and referred.
They're qualified and referred. And the 3 come from the other 48. Now, if you want to look at the probabilities of all of that, it means that your chance of getting a job if you have a qualified referral is about 20%. And if not, it's about 1. Which lottery do you want to be in? How much time are you willing to spend to be in the right lottery? I don't know. There are other strategies for getting a job, honest to God, and many of them are really quality. And all of the other things you have to do in order to make sure that you present yourself well and that your resume is up to date, and all of the idiot things that you could do if you're not paying attention to the details are all important. But that they're like putting your seatbelt on and safety and everything else. You need to learn how to drive a car. And if you want to go that direction, you need to know that in our society, the implication of referral is absolutely critical. And every recruiter, when they think about how they find somebody, is all about referring into somebody who's going to take your call. So all we're doing is unbundling it from the other side. That's all.
Interesting. And you said a whole lot in the past 10 minutes. I want to drill down a little bit more.
Sure.
To kind of highlight each step. So we start at the beginning, and what you said is start with a list of companies that you're interested in both pursuing and ones that you feel like have kind of these key indicators that they're likely to hire. Would you recommend someone start with a list of 20, 50? Where's the line where you're slimming it down too much versus?
I'd say 50, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
The act of doing this, the act of putting that list together, forces you to think about why the hell you want to work somewhere, as opposed to trying to invent it on the fly when somebody calls you who's a recruiter. If I spent a couple hours doing this kind of thing, several hours doing this kind of thing, and then you called me as a recruiter and said, here's my company, and I'd never heard of your company before. I have a bunch of questions to ask you that would help me put you into one of those pots of why I would want to, pursue this. It's my choice. I don't care how desperate you think you are. It should be your choice that you should be pursuing your values, not just responding to somebody from who says, oh, I want to try and consider you. You got to have a good reason. And because I got to tell you, then you're competing for the job. And part of that competition should be your ability to align your values, your interests, your skills, not just your skills, but all of those other things to why they should be picking you versus anyone else, because you have these strong interests in this. You can make it up, I get it, but the point is, it's just going to take you a little longer.
So you've spent some time, you've created this long list,
Yep.
And now it's about sort of finding those affinity points. And you mentioned, going to the same schools, kind of been top of your list a couple times and kind of giving the examples. Do you weight that as sort of a better affinity point than saying having a previous company, or does it not matter as long as you have a point?
Well, it probably depends on the school or the program. It may not. You may have been in Girls Who Code, or something along those lines. It doesn't have to be a degree program. It's an experience where you have an affinity with hundreds of other people, right? And if you volunteered for some community type of program, stacking stuff in a food bank, there's hundreds of thousands of people who've done that too. And you know what? I can make that an affinity that would make it very uncomfortable for you to say, oh, I'm not going to talk to you. You're going to talk to me because we have something in common that's important. And as recruiters, we know how to do this for when we want to talk to the candidates, but we sometimes forget when we're on the other side of that screen that we can be managing this process, but we just need to manage against some real truthful and transparent kind of value system here. So I'm going to look for those affinities. If I went to Stevens Institute of Technology, there was only 240 kids who graduated with me, and so over the course of 10 years, that's 5,000, 6,000. It's now, I think there's 30,000 or 35,000 living alumni from Stevens. I got to tell you, I can call any one of them, and they're gonna return my call. So, maybe you went to a school with 500,000 people graduating every year, and but maybe you need to look at the program within that school if you're going to look at that, kind of thing. So we had a STEM program or business program or whatever it might be, and look for the graduates there. And you should be able to do that on LinkedIn and or calling your alumni office.
So we fielded a lot of questions as to what is the level of person that you might be reaching out to, and we could kind of address this. Say that you're looking for a recruitment management or an AD or a director. There's obviously points where even if you have an affinity point with the CEO, that might not be your best entry in. It might not be someone who would engage in those sort of conversations. But then again, someone on the recruiting team might also not make sense. What is your thoughts on that?
It's a great question, and it depends probably on the level that you're going in for. The higher the level, the more likely you're looking at executive level kinds of things. But I got to tell you, I'm a recruiter. I'm looking at a stupid ATS screen. Does it indicate? It indicates that there's an employee referral, but it doesn't indicate who the referral is. It could be relevant. The president. But if it was the president, he would have sent that to me himself or herself, and then I'd be pissed that it's a friends and family thing going on here. So typically, it doesn't matter if it's the janitor. I don't care who it is. I just want an employee of that company to be my referral, and I'm fine with whatever I can get. But I do agree. Would it be better if it was a person that I actually worked with in a previous company, who knew how good I am, and who's willing to fall on a sword to go to the hiring manager and say, you're crazy not to at least give this person a try. You need to let them be up to bat. I want to work with people who are going to perform the way I know this guy's going to perform. Yeah, that would be really good. I want people to care that much, right? And I've done that a few times myself. Not often, but I've done that a couple times. And God help that hiring manager who doesn't at least give them a chance.
Now, on previous webinars, the conversation arose around that first contact. Like, you find this affinity, maybe you're connected on LinkedIn or another social network, and maybe you're not.
Right.
How do you reach out? Are you gonna choose one of those networks, like reach out through an in-mail? Are you trying to find their email and email their personal or work? Or if you're lucky enough to find their phone, text or call them? There might necessarily be a right answer, but what's your recommendation on approaching that?
I don't have a right answer. But I can only tell you what I do and what I recommend to other people to do. And when they do it, I find that they have reasonable success. And that is to go direct. If I find somebody with an affinity to me, but I don't know them, I'm not going to find somebody in between to say, hey, would you introduce me to somebody that I should know anyway? You know, from my point of view, if I find that there's affinity, I think I can write, a paragraph or two, a few sentences that clearly indicate I'm interested in having a chat with you about your company. And so I'm pretty straightforward, but I'm from New Jersey, so I'm pretty straightforward in saying I've targeted your company as a place I might be interested in working at. I'm not asking him for a job. I can say, hey, and there are 3 things that really turn me on about your company, and I want to confirm that with you.
More about having a candid conversation. You want to understand where he works to better understand if it's a place that you want to target.
I never, I go back to those 3 things. That's the conversation, is tell me a little bit about how you got here. Was it by accident? Maybe he got referred. Maybe he was put in by an executive search or contingent or something. How they got there, why they made their choice, what was the biggest surprise, typical stuff. There isn't a recruiter I know who can't carry on a conversation like that, but it's all learning, right? You now have learned that maybe the best way in is not a referral. Maybe there's a third party character who's got the ear of each of the key hiring managers in that area. Well, you know what? Then I'm going to track down that third party person, big time. There's too many third party folks who might say, I've placed people in this company who never have. So, when I find that somebody is getting in and companies are willing to spend time with that person, then I'm gonna make use of it. I want to learn.
Now, what about follow-up and persistence? A lot of what I've heard is that a lot more candidates are taking the direct approach, right? Because of the first time, they need to be a little bit more persistent. This isn't a one-shot head kill sort of market like it might have been, before COVID. Meaning their first reach out, their first attempt might not even reach their intended target. It might end up in a spam filter or just get buried somewhere. Furthermore, they might be able to find 2 points of contact or 3 that they have affinity with. Maybe they went to a popular school or that sort of thing. And we field questions all the time. Should I reach out to all 3? Should I start with 1, have a couple attempts at following up, and then move on to number 2? And again, there's no right answer, but I'm kind of curious on kind of what you recommend.
Well, follow-up is for 2 things. One is for networking, and the other is for, you've obviously gotten up to bat. I've always been in my lifetime, it's totally unacceptable to ignore me. Totally unacceptable. I will ensure that you will not hire me before I let you ignore me. So, but you have to accept the consequences, because you may very well not get the job as a result of that. So I'm not a good coach on that. I have no patience relative to that. So you're going to have to learn about that from somebody else, about how to keep doing that with a smile on your face, because I don't have a smile on my face. If you told me you were going to get back to me in a week, this job, and you don't get back to me in a week and a day, I'm on you, and I will do whatever I have to break down that door, including walking there. So I've always been that way, and I've lost a couple jobs that way too, and that's just fine. I'm perfectly okay with that. I did see a note from somebody who asked a question that's kind of similar, that they were presented by a recruiter, a third-party recruiter, and I think there was an interesting question with it, and I can't recall that, but it was kind of relevant to that.
A question in the chat box now.
Oh yeah, I've had a third-party agency offer to present me during this time, even if it's not for a fee, depending upon their relationship with the hiring manager and what the opportunity is. I think it's great. I have a very strong opinion about this as well. The third-party agency, if you're going to give them the opportunity to present you, you need to be able to tell them that it's for this job and for this period only, like a week, a month, whatever. Because if they're not being transparent, if they're not being fully open with you and they present you, and that hiring manager doesn't decide to go with you, then it's unlikely that you're going to get paid attention to for any job in that company, simply because that third-party recruiter is going to claim that they were the one that presented, and that they still should get a piece of the action in relation to that. So I want to be real clear. There are a lot of large companies that do not do much at all in terms of contingent hiring. They do a lot. They might do more in executive search. So you need to know the degree to which third party is a source that is used to some degree in the company that you are being presented in. Otherwise, you're screwing yourself with ever being able to get into that company. And
so avoid contingent firms.
You can ask any recruiter in any of those companies, and they'll tell you that one of the first things they look for is whether or not that person was presented by a third party. And they go, I'm not hiring. If I hire from third party, then why do I have a job?
Yeah.
So, it differs in different companies, in different places. You just need to know that. That's all.
Oftentimes in contracts with contingency companies, they will specify that if a candidate applies for a specific rec number, that it's tied to that rec number, and if they apply to something else, it doesn't go through the candidate. So it does. I mean, I think
but who's disclosing to whom? So that's how third-party people talk to employers, and how employers talk to third-party people. They never tell the candidate squat.
No.
So the candidate has a responsibility to know, since nobody's telling them, what is going on in terms of the deals between employers and recruiters. And if you don't take responsibility for doing that, then you deserve the consequences that you're going to get. And especially if you're a recruiter, because you know what's going on the other side.
And a lot of companies don't have a formal portal that third-party recruiters submit resumes to. So those resumes will usually go directly to a hiring party. A lot of times that's not even HR. That could be the hiring manager. It could be a recruiter. Either way, and in a lot of those times, if they don't want to pay a fee, they're saying, I don't even want to open this email, because if I find this person through my own accord and they try to claim that I found it through them and they see the emails open, so they're going to delete it or put it aside or not give a second thought, especially if they're in cost savings mode, which I think
there's some great tools that are being used, especially by larger companies, to manage this process and do it in a fair way for everybody. And so I think that's great. I think in smaller companies, they don't have some of those tools. So you have to rely literally on your judgment that the third-party organization does have a relationship with this company, that in fact the relationship produces people at the level that you would be coming in at. And then it makes sense to have some kind of judgment that I'm going to have this third-party person present me.
let's talk a little bit about standing out as a candidate. I think we've brainstormed a whole bunch of different ideas, and one thing that got asked towards the end of last week, I think during the after party, was what about video resumes? Now, we've seen the emergence of it, but not wide-scale adoption, or at least I've not seen wide-scale adoption from a candidate standpoint. But I think it's very interesting in that we live in this very video, very visual sort of world. What's your thoughts? Is that something that's no one's doing that you could stand out with?
First time I heard about video interviews was in the 1970s. I thought it was a dumb idea, and I still do. I think if you're selecting or screening, it makes good sense. If you are a candidate putting together your video interview that you're going to shoot out in a whole bunch of different places, I hope that you have some kind of job that you're looking for that requires that kind of skill set. Then it makes sense. But I can't imagine a busy recruiter taking 100 videos to be extreme and sitting there and watching them. That's not going to happen. But things change. I'm now seeing that most videos are accompanied with a technology tool that is getting better and better at transcribing every word perfectly in a searchable context. So now, if in a video there is a mention of a certain competency or skill or whatever, I should be able to search the text aligned to the actual seconds in which that comes up. And at some point, we're going to see the ability of a recruiter, for example, to show a hiring manager how a given question might be answered by 4 of the best candidates we've seen, as an example. And now that'd be kind of interesting. But I think what we're going to see is much more video in the use of screening and selecting the final candidates, if you will, as opposed to a workaround for a resume.
Interesting.
I actually read or I saw a post. I was talking to Brett about this. Somebody posted that the new resume is your content that you put online, like your articles and all the things that you're talking about. That a resume is not going to tell your whole story, but most applicant tracking systems have a feature that will look at your social footprint and bring in all of your blogs, where your profiles, your LinkedIn profile, your wherever you're at. And if you're and you know, Brett was saying that not everybody's writing articles, and that's true. Not everybody's writing articles. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, of actually putting out, you know, content about what it is that you're interested in as being something that puts you ahead of other candidates?
Well, I think if you want a job and you're thinking about managing your career, and you have a point of view that every 2 years you need to kind of rethink where I am, where I want to go, and so on. If you're that kind of person, and I have been on occasion, and when I talk to folks who can be that way, and they've got 6 months to get this done, then I suggest the following. I suggest thinking about what that would look like 6 months from now if you had a new job. What would be the kind of challenges you would be interested in tackling? You know, and maybe it's internal mobility, let's say, just for sake of argument, because we know it's starting to get hot and people want to do more about that kind of thing. Then today, what I would do is I would call SHRM or ERE or someone who, or Recruiting Daily, or, you know, anybody that kind of publishes a set of articles, white papers, and so on. You could do it with ATAP as well. And I'd say, I'm interested in collecting and writing about internal mobility, and I want to interview top TA leaders like Brett Feek about his thinking about that. And if I do that, would you help me edit that a little bit? And then, because I want to quote them and get their thinking, and then this is where we're going with internal mobility. And the editor is going to go, oh my God, I love that. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for even doing that. So I don't have to write those damn articles. And then what I would do is I would make a list and I would call Brett Feek and I'd say, Brett, I hear you understand a little bit about internal mobility. I saw one of your posts or I listened to one of your podcasts. I want to interview you about this. I'm going to take about 15, 20 minutes. I've got about 6 or 7 questions. And I'm writing an article for ERE. And when I'm done, I will be quoting various people, but I'll let you know ahead of time so that you can see that I've quoted you accurately and that it's not inconsistent with anything that you're required to deal with your company. Is that okay? What's your phone number? How about Tuesday at 2:00 or 3, whichever you prefer.
Tuesday too.
And then I would do it. And if I had to get my sister to come by and help me write because I have trouble putting 2 sentences together, I would do that. I would do whatever it took to write that article and get that out. And I got to tell you, that will set you in a place where if you were interviewing for that job in which internal mobility was going to be a critical change, I can tell you the network I have. I can show you the articles in which I'm quoting members of the network that I can draw on to help me come up with creative, innovative ways so that I'm going to help your organization move forward. So yes, in that context, it's the right thing to do.
That's a great idea. I mean, contacting.
Of course it is.
I've heard I've heard.
It's not a new idea. It's not my idea. It's the strategies for how you find a job, Stacy. They're all over the place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's just we need to elevate them to do them. Do you think that lots of people will do this? No. Only a few do.
No, not everyone's going to write an article, no.
They're just not going to do
ATAP
it.
gets hit up by 20 calls tomorrow.
But the best of us, if you think about it, I think we should be pointing recruiters and others who are looking for a job to how the very best quality professiondon't get jobs. And they get jobs because they're passionate about their work. They don't even think about doing this intentionally. They just start calling people and asking them what they think about stuff. And when they get a bunch of stuff together, they put it out there for others. And then somebody calls them up and says, would you be interested in X, Y, and Z? You network in order to create powerful results for your job and your organization. And then you don't have to network for a job.
Saying it comes as a byproduct of what you're doing.
Success.
Yeah.
Networking is how you become successful, not because you know somebody, but because you know how to pick people's brains, because you can interview people like a recruiter. You can engage them, but you have to be, first and foremost, you have to be curious, passionate about recruiting, have some critical thinking skills, be committed to share.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
That's my point. If you're not those things, you're going to be successful in something else, but it may not be leading recruiting organizations.
Interesting. Let's talk about the future for a second, because there's people on the call right now that are maybe junior in their career, and they're thinking, are the skills today really what I'm going to need tomorrow? So you've been on the cutting edge. 1996, you wrote a book on the recruiting on the internet. That's all remembering.
And then wrote another 8.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Another 7. But that one in particular, because if for those on the call or those that are watching, if you remember back to 1996, that was like AOL was just that was like 2400 baud modems, AOL, like age, sex, location, like those sort of chats. That was way before even really job boards started to come onto the market.
They were just starting there. There was only 3 in 96. We could only find 300 job boards.
That's actually really surprising. I don't expect you to say 300 job boards. And
well, there's probably 30,000 right now. So
fair point.
So what was the question?
What should recruiters that really want to stay in the field, what are the skill sets that tomorrow is going to demand? Where's the workforce shifting?
I think that the biggest shifts that I've seen are in really 2 different areas. One, specialization.
Mm-hmm.
People are becoming really, really good at one aspect of recruiting. I don't think from a leadership point of view this is the key issue, but I think especially as you're moving up, you need to master something. And whether it be recruitment marketing, whether it be sourcing, whether it be analytics, etc., all of them have pieces that I think are important. And I don't think you just make it up. I don't think you just have an opinion. I think you have to have a intentional way of tracking down the information that exists. There's probably 20 books that have been written in the last 18 months on recruitment marketing, and each one has something to offer. I have, you can't really say it. I have I buy almost every recruitment related book. And I don't need to do that anymore, but I still do it.
Yeah.
In part because I think I can scan them relatively quickly, and there are always some nuggets in which I learn. So there's an attitude that I've always been very much a fan on, and that is that you must be first and foremost a student. If you have an attitude of being a intentional student, that I'm here to learn from you, not to tell you shit, I'm just here to learn. And your arrogance, gets downplayed a little bit. Your ego gets handled a little bit better. And what you start doing is surprising yourself about, wow, that's interesting. If I focus on learning something, I'm going to learn something. And then I love that. And then you can share it in a way that makes sense from how you see things. And so first and foremost, I think somebody who wants to make a career out of recruiting ought to make some choices. They should learn how to master something, decide whether that's what they want to do, and so become better and better at that part of it. And then eventually, to make serious money, they need to go consult doing that because they have expertise now. Write a book, do whatever. But some will say, wow, I want to learn that, but I also want to learn this, and I really want to have the opportunity to influence, what's going on. And so now you need to focus in on some of the leadership issues. So for me, specialization is one key issue. I think the other shift is 100 years ago, we believed that there was an infinite number of people who would line up for jobs for my company. And so we just say, line up, I'll take you and you and you and you. The rest of you just go away. And then later on, I need another job just like it. And I just tell people to line up.
Wash, rinse, and repeat.
That's not recruiting anymore. And it's not going to happen that way anymore. And we're going to have to think about how do we invest in that pool that we dip our hands into all the time to try to find somebody who's diverse, who's also a mechanical engineer, who has 5 years of experience in high-speed packaging, who goes, and you can go on and on. And we're going, wait a second, if I'm gonna be in this for a long haul, how do people become mechanical engineers? Where is the incentive for them to become a mechanical engineer? Why aren't there more diverse people who are learning at an earlier stage so that they're going to get to the point where they are that? And what is my responsibility to do that or help do that? What is my company's responsibility? What is my industry's responsibility? And then, obviously the more leadership you get, the more national you get, and the more global you get. And if you listen to some of the TA leaders who are running the largest corporations in the world, or the hiring of the largest corporations in the world, you'll find that they have that point of view. That their point of view is really not just how do I hire this next engineer, but how do I build and support systems that influence how my company spends its money to ensure that more women are interested in engineering, as opposed to other things they might do. I want to make the case we need to have, if we're going to succeed as a corporation, we need more of X in the year 2030. So, I used to follow the Bureau of Labor Statistics on a particular thing, which was mechanical engineers. And it ran something like this, and I'll give you this real fast. So for every 100,000 kids entering the 9th grade this year, in 4 years, only 68% are actually going to graduate from high school. Only 40% enter college, and only 20% actually graduate from college within 5 years. Of every 100,000 kids who go into school, 9th grade, this year, in 8 or 9 years, only 20% of them will have a degree. Of that, only 800 will have an engineering degree. Only 112, I think, the last time I looked, will be mechanical engineers, and only 11 of those mechanical engineers will be women 9 years from now, unless we do something. And 5 years after that, only half of them will still be working as mechanical engineers. Now, if I'm a world-class recruiter, there's only one question I want to know. When should I meet those 5 women?
It's a fair.
Now that's somebody who wants to put a body in a seat, right? But if I'm the boss of the boss of the the boss's boss, whatever, of that recruiter, I need to know how I can make it easier for us to find more of those. I think some companies are able to do that. If most of us haven't come across too many people who used to work at Exxon.
That's a good point.
Because they still are there. Anyhow, I'm just saying, there are some companies that know how to go really at the point at which you're going to go to college and find the people they want then. Procter & Gamble doesn't do a lot of experienced hiring. They hire from college and they start at an earlier point. Goes on and on.
Makes sense. I know we're running low on time. We have a couple of questions, Stacy, that want to be addressed, and then we'll open it up for the after party and anyone who wants to turn on their camera and open conversation. I think we had a few in the chat, right?
Have we had fun, by the way?
Yeah.
What's that?
Have we had fun?
Oh,
I'm having a great time.
Oh, good. Because I'm enjoying this. This is good.
Daniela asks, what if the answer to your job search is to change careers? How do you figure out what the career is and where to start?
Okay. I can the only answer I can give you is what I help my daughter do. So my daughter, when she graduated from college, she was a theater major and loved theater. And she first walked through Europe for 6 months, which drove my wife nuts. Came back and then said, I want to do alternative theater, and took a plane to Portland, Oregon. I live in New Jersey, Portland, Oregon. And then for 5 years, she got a job as selling tickets for their opera while she did her alternative theater. Many stories around that. After 5 years, she said, I'm not going to become a famous actor. And I think I've done all the things I want to do with acting. I need to go find something that gives me satisfaction in a job. I said, cool. I said, here's one idea. I said, go back to your school that you graduated, go to the Alumni Association, and ask them to show you the records of the people who graduated 5 years before you with the same degree that you got in theater. What are they doing now? And she did. And she discovered there was several things that people were doing, and one of them was art therapy. And she says, wow, cool. But what do I said, well, what do you think? How many art therapists, are on that list of people who graduated from, your school and are now art therapists? And there were about 12, and she was able to, call and find and talk to 6 of them. And she goes, and I said, and find out how they got to be an art therapist. Did they just put up a shingle called art therapy? And no, they went to one of 2 schools, all of them who were in the practice. And so she got her master's in Boston in art therapy, and has been doing that for 20 years. And if I would say the same thing to anyone. You want to do something else? Go talk to people who are doing something else. And until you find something that turns you on, and then figure out how to get there.
It's not that different from the process we were describing earlier. If you're a recruiter now and you want to be in media, marketing, whatever the case is, find someone who was a recruiter, isn't a recruiter, and is now in that, maybe a year or 2 removed, and reach out to them with that commonality of, you made a switch. That's exactly what I'm looking to do. Can I have a conversation with you? Would you mind mentoring me in exactly how you got that done? And you're kind of back full circle from where we started.
I love it, and I think that we have an awful lot of people who have left. Certainly there's a lot of turnover in recruiting, particularly in third party, but third party then often migrates to working in corporate. And there's a whole group of people who go back and forth and love the idea of going back and forth. And there's some extraordinary people who have been third-party recruiters for 20, 30 years and love what they do and do it in an extraordinary way. So, but if you leave, you need to have some thinking about that kind of thing.
Makes
sense.
And
my first job was in career services at Stevens Institute of Technology when I was going through graduate school. And that's when I fell in love with recruiting. I was seeing it from the other side and seeing how difficult it was for those candidates to find, especially alumni who were out of work looking for jobs, and how uncomfortable they were, even though they were often in high demand because of their engineering skills. They often didn't realize that. They often, their identity was too wound up in their job itself, in those days anyway.